This is the Behavioral Divide, brought to you by Avantis Investors, where we bring together both academic research and real-world financial advice to uncover insights that may help us make better financial decisions. I am Jeremy Thornton with Avantis Investors, here with our host, Professor Hal Hershfield. Hal, we're on episode 15, and this one's a little different. I had a lot of fun with it. Why don't you give us sort of the rundown for today?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So today's all about how to communicate more effectively so that people actually listen and respond. Today, rather than having the conversation between an advisor and a guest, we just had the academic guest on today. And the person who that was is Todd Rogers. He's the Weatherhead Professor of Public Policy at Harvard's Kennedy School. He's the author of Writing for Busy Readers, Communicate More Effectively in the Real World. And he consults regularly with schools, government organizations, and his many, many students from the Kennedy School over the years who work for high-powered organizations. We thought it'd be interesting for me just to talk to him and then to pop in some questions from advisors, since the subject matter was one where this was really sort of concrete and led to that type of conversation. I'll say one big takeaway is this idea that we can be kinder in our communications by centering our communications around the reader in ways that I don't think we regularly do. We think the kind thing to do is to give a lot of preamble and let people know exactly why we're reaching out to them and give them all the information. But the kinder thing to do is take the perspective of someone that has a million other things that's going on and try to tailor our communications for them. And that doesn't just mean make them shorter. It's not just that. One of the things we get into is all the different principles that can apply there. So I think this is a really exciting and imminently applicable conversation.
Absolutely. And I'm excited for the focus of taking this research into really getting at, well, what can help advisors? The work itself is super, super interesting. And I really love that point around less is more is great, but just the kindness aspect. Are we really centered on the reader? And so bringing that into the context of what we think will be helpful for advisors, I think is going to be really interesting. But what's important is that we got there, I think, from some great help. That we want to say thank you to the folks at Wealth Architects and their CEO, Mark Johnson, for submitting some really thoughtful, insightful questions that really allowed us to get right at what we think advisors, or what we heard from them, advisors will care about. So we're excited for you all to hear that interview, and hopefully you find it helpful.
Awesome. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it, Al.
I'm so excited to spend a little bit of time talking to Todd today. In setting this up, Todd, I was thinking about like just the sheer number of communications I probably send out in a given day, and probably how little thought I give it to make sure that actually what I'm sending out is something that people respond to. But I know like there's a whole science beyond how to do this more effectively that you're really, at the forefront of. And look, I'm just excited to be talking about this because I think this is going to be super relevant to people. So thank you for coming today. I appreciate it. All right.
Thanks for having me, Hal.
When I send you a text to try to get you to come on the show, and I'm laughing to myself because I'm thinking I'm how many things that I mess up? Because I remember thinking, I got to be respectful. I know this is a busy guy. I mean, we're friends, but also like, you've got a lot of other things to do. And I wrote you this text and I put some thought into it. And then I looked at it afterwards and I think it took up like, I had to keep scrolling to make sure that I could read all of it. So what did I mess up to start there?
Well, I kept it prepared for this. This is a single text message that House. It was hilariously long, and other than some fundraising text messages that I get and don't read, I think it's the longest message I've gotten in, I don't know, other than like my grandmother probably sent me one where she dictated it and didn't proofread it.
All right. Well, so this is great. So right off the bat, we know that then maybe by the end of this, I'll be better as well. All right. So let's get into this because I think, and the funny thing is I wasn't trying to give you fodder, and I realized in doing it, like, man, I'm actually lucky that you responded given how much I messed up. So let me ask you, like, first, like, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when they're trying to communicate to others to get them to do something?
All right. So the high level of this work is everyone is busy, everyone is skimming. And so we should add a round of editing to everything we write where we ask ourselves, how do I make it easier for a skimmer? Because that makes it more likely that they will read, understand, and respond. It's also kinder to the skimmer because in addition to being hilariously long, I still haven't read it. I saw it was from you. And so, you're an acquaintance of mine, Ash. And so I started reading it and then I was like, what is he asking me? And then I skimmed and I got to the end and you're like, it was a couple of sentences of like preamble before it was, would you be willing to go on my pod? And so I think I instantly replied, yes, but this is a ridiculous message.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, maybe in there, you should have buried, we sometimes run experiments like this where we will bury in like the third paragraph, some sentence. If you're reading this, like come by my office and I'll give you $20. You should have buried something in there like hateful about me. You've been like, ever since you lost your hair at 20, I think you've been downhill or like attractiveness wise. I don't know. So one is like the big picture is we should always edit everything from the lens of how do we make it easier for skimmers. It's more effective for us. It's kinder. It's more accessible. But how do you do that? Then we have a bunch of principles. And one of them is less is more. And everybody knows this quote that is often misattributed to Mark Twain. I would have written you a shorter message if I'd had more time. I'm sorry this message is so long. I would have written a shorter one if I'd had more time. And what I love about that is it says two things. It says, it is worthy of apology that I have burdened you with all this. And second, it takes more time to write less. And both of those, like if we really think about it as centering the reader, and it is not enough that we just send the info to them, it is actually our responsibility for them to actually read, understand, and respond, then it completely changes the way we write. And our goal is to make it easy for them.
All right. I think this is fascinating because I want to drill down on this like kinder point, because part of the irony here is that I was trying to be kind, right? I was like, and I've seen this with students of mine too, or colleagues that I work with, where they're trying to be respectful by saying, let me give you all the information. Or in my case with you, like, let me like give you a big just sort of heads up about what this is and why it's so important, how much I value your time, ironically. So I mean, and I know that we're going to drill down on these other principles in just a couple minutes here, but like, is there something to this misinterpretation here that I think I'm being kind by being respectful, but in fact, I could be kinder by being shorter? I'm trying to unpack that a little bit there.
Yeah, it basically, if you center the reader, you want to do multiple things. You have competing goals. One of them is I want to signal to you that I respect you and value your time and think you're important. And two, I want you to do whatever I'm asking you to do. And probably three, I want to be nice to you. But honestly, if you don't know I'm being nice, then it's only, it's an uncredited kindness.
Okay.
On the first one, you want to signal that you value my time. There are a lot of different strategies. So Jessica Lasky-Fink and I wrote this book, Writing for Busy Readers, and we're one level up from the micro tactics you're asking about. How should you send that text message? Well, there's not one answer, but you go through the lens of how do I make it easier for the reader? And so like we run experiments with text message where if you cut 1 out of 4 sentences, you increase response rates. Just a 4-sentence message, you just cut 1 sentence and people are more likely to respond.
Yeah.
But your 17 paragraph text message is like comically, like honestly, one way is like it's comically long. And so I think maybe there's a punchline buried in there.
Yeah.
But I mean, another like I work with a lot like we'll just say like a nuclear. I work with like one of the federal nuclear agencies. I work with the CIA with some on different intelligence communications, and I worked with the UN on. They all had the same problem of in our organization, the too short or shorter than the norm signals I didn't do the work.
Yeah.
And so then as a leader of the organization, you can reset the norm. So like the UN, for example, had this norm of 3,500 words for these certain kinds of reports. That was a cap. And quickly it turned into the expectation. And everyone agreed it could have been said in 500 words. But if you said 500 and everyone else sends 3,500 and the norm is 3,500, you have not done your job.
Right.
And so as a leader, you can reset the norm. And so I work with a bunch of like tech companies where the leadership team will get together and be like, look, I want to reset it. If you write something longer than X, you are telling me you did not use your judgment to prioritize what's important. And instead you decided to waste my time using my judgment, discerning what is most important here.
Yeah.
And that reset all of a sudden, if it comes from the top, everyone can do it. But if you're a manager, you know, an advisor talking to customers and you worry about like customer relationship, there's a lot of other strategies, but you don't have that kind of authority.
By the way, I think that's such an important point, because you can also imagine that whoever's in charge of a given firm can reset that norm for advisors, right? And that can also be communicated. Like I could imagine explicitly having a conversation with my clients where I'm saying, by the way, our communications from here on out will be a little shorter because we are trying to be kind to you. But of course, if you want to have a longer message or conversation, that's always an opportunity or always an option there, right? Just to be outright about it.
Yeah. One is to be transparent about it. I mean, another is even if you can't be, right? Like this is your inbound. It's like you're sending an outbound to someone who you hardly communicate with or never. You're balancing, like you said, those competing goals of like signaling competence and respect while also making it effective. There are ways you can do it, like this the Defense Nuclear Agency that I work with. They write to the Department of Energy. They also write to electeds and their aides. Now, Congress people do not read at the level of PhD physicists. I mean, statement of the obvious. But the same report has to go to both.
Wow.
And so what do? Like they have created a really hierarchical structure where it's like the report is one page. That's the report. And then they have liberally embedded appendices with different levels of technical detail. I've worked with other organizations where they're sending emails, and they, like in my lab and a couple of organizations I work with, they set up this norm where like, look, every email is going to be 4 sentences or less, but we're going to liberally use underneath the sign off. Hey, Hal, you asked me what questions should we talk about? Below, I list them. I'm free the rest of the afternoon. Give me a call if you want to talk about them. And then I'm free to do whatever, or attached or linked. But it basically ensures that like my message gets through. It doesn't just get lost, because when you open it and you look at it and you're like, oh Jesus, I'm not gonna like, yeah.
You know, we've just started this at UCLA now, where any formal communications that come, there's a box where the main points are. Yeah. And then if you want to read anything more, like below it, there's all and it's gotten me to actually read the emails that come from Central Campus. Now, let me ask you about this. I want, like, just to get concrete here, because I think what you're saying, it makes so much sense. And I think if there's, you know, one major thing that comes from this, we can be kinder by being shorter. But let's get concrete too, because one of the big principles that you mentioned in the book, and I just want to say it is a great book. And for the folks listening, this is a snapshot of the important points, but I think reading it really gives you a deep dive into it. One of the big principles that you mentioned is to direct attention with formatting. Can you tell me a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's sort of illustrated. One of the big principles is less is more, as we were just talking about. And we wrote a 217-page book to describe that. And you're like, well, that seems hypocritical. No, because people expect a book to look like a book.
Yep.
And so you have to write for what your audience expects. That said, within the constraints of a book looking like a book, we made it incredibly navigable with formatting in different ways, right? Like it's it's carefully structured, it's skimmable, but we use formatting to reinforce the key points and to make it easy for people to skim. And we haven't talked about any experiments, but every one of these things we're talking about, we have dozens of experiments to sort of reinforce that it turns out skimmers, when they're skimming, there are 3 kinds of reading. There's scanning, which is just darting around, getting oriented in the text. And that is where headings are awesome. They just let you jump and be like, do I want to? No, next. Then there's skimming, which is what we all think about, where we're like jumping around within a paragraph. And often we have to go backwards to reread when it's important.
Okay.
And then there's just close reading, which is the way we write. It's just not the way we often read.
Oh, wait. So just to be clear, you're saying we write thinking that people are going to be close readers, but we read as skimmers or
scanners.
Scanners.
Yeah.
And I mean, right away, that's a funny mismatch, right?
Totally.
So say a little bit more about that. So, I mean, is this like literally applied to the level of an email? I should have like headers, or how, like, say a little bit more about that.
Again, it just depends on the context,
Okay.
norms, expectations. But yeah, I mean, I try not to have emails. We have a norm of 4 sentences, but
Okay.
then underneath or attached or linked, we have whatever the like core content is. And I very liberally use formatting to just make it easier for people to skim. And I want them to feel free to move on if they already get the gist. Because I do these study when I teach it, and I teach it to
Yeah.
organizations all the time. If any of your audience wants to reach out, reach out. One of the things that we'll do is these activities where I give you 8 seconds to skim a document, a 1-page announcement from your CTO, your chief technology officer. And everyone will skim it. And then I'll be like, enter in the chat or raise your hand to share, what did you pull out of it? And they're like, everybody pulled out different things, which is a problem. And then we have another version where we just have headings where there's 3 sections. And everyone gets the key info, which is you need to reset your password. That's the secret. That's like the key info. And the way you get it is like, it's obvious. But if you want to know the details of the hack that we are undergoing right now, there's a section called, nature of the breach or whatever. And so like, not only is it more effective, it also, as you and Jeremy will like recognize that when you skim, there's a little bit of angst that you missed before you move on. When you move on and you skimmed, you're like, did I miss the point of that?
Yeah.
And like formatting makes it quicker and comprehensive.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what about like bold? I'm thinking when you say formatting, of course, I'm thinking back. My son finished preschool last year, and we would get these messages from my son's preschool that were like ransom notes with like some like all caps here, bold there, underline, italics. And I'm like, I don't know what the important point is, but like, so how should we use this? Have you done any experiments where you're actually like testing these sorts of things too?
Yeah. So the majority of people interpret bold, underline, and highlight as the writer saying to the reader, this is the most important text.
Okay.
And so it's like a sort of meta communication in
Okay.
the writing. But when you start using different kinds of formatting in the same text, you get heterogeneous interpretations, which is to say, I read it and I think the bolded is the most important. You read it, you think the underline is the most important. And since you and I are both skimming, we are leaving the same text with different interpretations of what the point of it was.
Okay.
And so basically all that does is introduce noise and confusion into the reader's experience.
So
When
the
you
takeaway.
bold some things, underline other things, font change others, highlight others, like what is a reader supposed to think you mean unless you're providing a legend for what they mean, which textbooks do, right? Like textbooks will tell you that what each kind of formatting means.
Right.
In the absence of that, which none of us actually do,
Of
you
course.
just use one and you use it incredibly
Conservatively.
conservatively or discerningly to be, because we also have these experiments where when you highlight one sentence, you decrease reading of everything else relative to not highlighting anything at all.
Okay.
Right? Which is
Okay.
because we're all skimming. We all want to move on. And so I got the key info. And then when you highlight 4 sentences, you decrease the reading of any one of those. Like, it's just sort of like there's trade-offs all the way down. And you can't write effectively without knowing what your goal is. But if you know your goal, then everything should serve the goal.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great though, because there's some trade-offs, like you're saying. It's like now I might get you to not read the other part, but like if I then increase the likelihood that everybody reads the one part that's really important, it's worth putting that formatting in. I think that's such an important point there. Todd, you have this other principle, and then I'm going to get to some of these questions from advisors because I think there's some really interesting ones there. But you have this other principle where you talk about making the response easy, given how much we actually want people to respond. When we're communicating to them, normally it's because we want them to respond in some way. How do I concretely do that? What does that look like?
Well, it depends on context. It depends on goals, everything there. I mean, we should add, like, you could probably jump the gun at the end of your question and be like, other than it depends on context and goals, what's the answer to this? I do want to also, with regards to like structuring, there's this regulation in the U.S. Army called bottom line up front, bluff.
Yeah.
And in the U.S. Army, it's actually codified in a reg. And it has since spread to all the armed forces around the U.S., but also around the world. And the first line is the bottom line. And what's awesome, it has multiple benefits. One, is it helps writers know where the key info goes. It helps readers know where the key info goes. And it also protects lower status writers from the incredibly counterproductive throat clearing they have to do. Dear General, you may not remember me. We crossed paths in the mess in Kandahar. We talked about our high school football rivalry. I admire your work so much, especially the reforms you've done with regards to the structure of the base. I have an urgent question, right? It makes it more, that wastes the general's time. It also makes it more likely he reads it. That's cool, but it doesn't work in every context. It comes off as too aggressive in a lot of settings. And so if it's a norm, it works awesomely. Like at UCLA, you have your little box. And the first time they did it, you're like, what are they doing?
Yep.
But now they've reset the norm and it doesn't come off as anything other than helpful. And so like, it all depends. You're writing to an audience. You need to conform to the expectations of the audience, but within that constraint, how do you make it easier for them? And in this case, you asked, how do you make it easier to respond? Again, it depends what you're trying to do, but here are a couple common things that we can make easier for people. Other than all of behavioral science, reducing the number of steps, reducing friction, making it like pre-populating forms, all those are making it easier. But how often do you forward something to somebody and say, what do you think? And then there's a whole thread of 17 questions and responses that they have to then read and figure out, what exactly are you asking me? What do I think? I got to read the whole thread to make sense of it. What you are saying is that the time it would have taken me to summarize it for you and ask a question is of more value than the time I am imposing on you to read through the whole thing.
Okay.
And like what I love is when we talk with organizations and teams, instantly they leave that thinking it's disrespectful in a way that they never thought of it before. And so they no longer or FYI. All of that is like, you're shifting responsibility to the person and they've got a sense make. And if you could turn it into a 20-second response instead of a 7-minute response of sense making, you're saving time. Another is like, let's find a time. And then they're like, okay, well, what about these 6? And then somebody else replies and says, I can do these 2. And then the third person replies and says, I can do Hal's first, but not his second. And at that point, I have no idea what Hal's first and second were. And so like you always if you want the last person to respond, you make it as easy as possible. You say, these times work for all of us. Does it work for you? And then it's this. Those are just like super micro applications. But the idea is we just like step back. I think I'm done. Everything I want in this is there. Everything I'm required to give you is there. Step back and be like, okay, so now how would I make it easier for you to achieve the goal that I have for this communication?
Okay. That's great. Okay. So there's we got some great advisor questions here and I want to see what your thoughts are. So I really like this one. This is maybe more of a specific circumstance, but I think it actually applies more generally too. You get this situation where you've got clients who have action items that they need to push through on, but they've been delaying. So, there's the example of like putting in, finishing the estate planning documents. They need to get updated, but they've delayed for the past couple of years. How can you make it easier for them to do it?
Well, so I don't know the context well enough you want to just paint out the scenario for me, Hal?
Let's imagine a scenario where I've got clients who have estate planning documents. They've got an estate already. They've added to their family, so they've had another kid. And I've told them as an advisor, you've got to, we've got to update the estate. And 3, 4, 5 years have gone by, and it's on my to-do list items, but it hasn't happened.
Okay. So I am going to pretend that I am talking to my estate planner who I have not finished this task with. And can we hypothetically call him Bill?
Let's do it.
Well, it is Bill. So Bill, I'm talking to you. We left the meeting with an incredible word salad of 17 things that I think I'm supposed to do, and I'm not sure. But at the time, I was pretty sure I knew what we were talking about.
Yep. Okay.
And then I went back to my job, which is, running experiments to make sure people don't read or do read things. And then my wife and I check in 2 days later. We're like, I'm not sure. And then we're like, well, should we email him? And then we're like, no, because everything he says, it turns into 7 paragraphs of whatever. And so it has now been 3 years, and it's clearly not important enough to him to make it clear to us what we're supposed to do. Like, one easy way to have done it would have been to co-create in that initial meeting a checklist of numbered items, and then email it to both of us, and then schedule if he cared or if I cared, one of us put it in our calendar to make sure that it's resent to us. But either
Yeah.
way, but like a number checklist. If there's
Yeah.
a checklist, there should be a checklist. It should, because like
Yeah.
actually this illustrates perfectly I was talking to Frances Fry. She's a colleague of mine at the business school, and she and her wife do a podcast and about like they have this concept of radical ownership of leadership and own performance. And Frances was pushing this frame that I really like, which is of radical ownership for your own communication. What if someone not reading, responding, following through on what we agreed with was not on them? It was not their fault, but it was my fault. Meaning I gave them all the things and now it's on them. And what if it was on me? How would I do
Yeah.
it differently? It's not enough to throw it over from my desk onto your desk and now we wait.
Right.
I mean, think about your collaborators. Think
Yeah,
about
for sure.
everyone you ever work. Like we act like I got to get off my desk and put it on yours and then it's on you. Fine. But if it was really important, I would own, how do I make sure it's easy for you
Yeah.
to do? And in that case, Bill would have like owned it and turned
Yeah.
it into, there are 4 things you need to do by these dates. I'm going to pre-write emails that are going to ping you on these, whatever. But it's clear that Bill doesn't care if I follow through. And I don't think.
And by the way, I think this comes back to the kindness thing. I feel like there's probably this error where I'm like, I think I'm being kind by putting on your desk and not bugging you about it. But it's up to me in this relationship, it's up to me, it's up to Bill in a way to make sure you actually do it.
And one way to do it in even more kinder and respectful way, which I'm really mindful of, like a lot of these communications, I know from the questions you're asking that you had the same impression that others of our colleagues have, that I am saying short is better. I'm saying kind is better and effective is better. And how that translates depends. Like one thing that I do in sales meetings, I have in other stages of my career spun out a couple of companies that I advise periodically at my lab. And in sales meetings, I will often say, when would be useful for me to ping you? So that then we schedule it, and I will write it with them. I'll be like, so is this cool if and then I'll just say, I rewrote this together. But that's like negotiating a follow-up. Here, it could be negotiating like, what would be a useful way to make this easier for you?
Yeah.
And then you could co-create it at the end of the meeting. And like, I do the same thing for scheduling meetings. Like you may as well not send 23 emails for us to find a time. At the end of this, let's just spend a minute in person and
do it right
schedule
now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know this, but does modality matter? So, I think we've sort of thought that email is the best mode of communication for talking to clients. Do we know anything from the research of if other forms of communication lead to faster responses? Whether it's a phone call, text, video, Slack message. I mean, I guess we're not slacking our clients, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. In a previous life that you know about, Hal, I used to work on civic engagement and how to get people to vote. And in 2006, partner organization, we ran a randomized control trial. I was not involved in this one, but I was on the team in consulting. Found that texting people the night before an election increased turnout by 4 percentage points.
Wow.
Then in 2010, I and others replicated it and found that texting the night before an election increased turnout by 1 percentage point. Then in 2017, another organization replicated it and found it texting the night before an election increased turnout by 0.1 percentage points. And so what happened between 2006 and 2017, Hal? Like,
People started getting a lot more texts.
Exactly. So there was nothing special about the mode. It's does the mode capture attention long enough to receive the message and respond and do the performed action. And like, so there's nothing magic about the mode. So yes, text may be more effective than email. I have no idea. I think I work with school districts where parents report text overload and they basically stop reading everything. And so there is nothing magic about the mode. There is just, how do we make it easier for the amount of allotted attention we're going to get for people to understand, respond to the information.
Okay, here's another one. How about frequency? So, how often should we be reaching out? And this goes back to your conversation earlier about, Bill and the estate planning.
Again, it depends on context, norms, and expectations. You got to beat me on this one next time, Hal. Next question, please. I don't know. Jessica and I have a paper showing that if people find you're communicating, this is with one of the massively open online course companies,
Sure.
that if people find your information useless, then changing the subject line when you mail them twice a week increases effectiveness because
Okay.
they're automatically deleting you when it's the same subject line.
Sure.
And like, it just, so I don't know. And this is one of the things like where, when we work with teams, we're like, you may as well, if there are specific people you communicate with regularly, ask them how they want to be communicated
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if in the absence of that, you refer to it and be like, look, I said I would respond in 2 weeks in my previous message. Anyone who does sales or cold calls knows this. You get stuck when they're like, I'll follow. They're like, oh yeah, sounds great. I'll reach out to you later about this. They don't. And you're like, am I being rude by reaching out again when you said you always are like, if I don't hear back from you in 2 weeks, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Okay.
But it's about managing expectations is my experience, but I don't think that's about effective communication. That's really about relationship management.
That's a good call. All right. So here's I might have maybe 2 more questions here. So I love this one. This is a great question from an advisor. They asked, is there a difference? I'll say, is there a difference between the application of your principles that you've uncovered with research between the times we reach out to first-time clients, call them like prospective clients, versus maintenance with existing ones?
Depends on norms, context, expectations. But it depends
Let me tell you what I think is
what
happening under the hood of this question. And I think it's at the heart of some of the stuff I was asking you earlier too, which is, and you brought it up about the generals, right? Where it's like, I want to show respect. I want to tell you I care. I want to do all the check-ins and everything. There's like you said, there's definitely different levels of, norms, expectations, and culture around these things. But I guess part of the question here is, how do I actually concretely do this for a new client? Like, I don't want to be too short and look like it's an AI generated note. I don't want to be too long, and then with an existing client, I've got to say a couple things up front. It's great. Hope everything's going well. Check, how are the kids? And then get to the context. So I'm trying, I think there's just tension there between the like human side and the respect and kindness side.
Yeah. I mean, there are workarounds, but they aren't full solutions. The workarounds are below, like right now I do a lot of these workshops on effective communications for firms. And when we are communicating, I often want to give a bio on me, a little bit about other people who found this so useful, a description of whatever. And what they turn into is 3 sentences and below, and then about me, about the program, about whatever. And then it's like, I'm not giving them short shrift. They're not getting the content. It's obviously designed to make it easy for them to figure. And if there is a question in the beginning, that's the question. But like, hey, Hal, it's so good meeting you at that event. You said you want to learn more about the program, see below. I also include a little bit of bio about myself and other firms like yours that I work with. Do you want to schedule a meeting? Here 3 times?
Great.
Right. And then it's a full whatever. But it depends on the norms, expectations, the context. I mean, advisors, I presume, have performance reports quarterly or annually to their clients. And in those settings, like the first time, it is, how am I supposed to make sense of this insanely compliant document? But then over time, they like figure out how to navigate it because it's consistent. And they know where to jump. Oh, what's my personal rate of return this quarter or whatever.
Yep.
And so eventually they get used to it. I bet you could do a better job in a meeting orienting them to it.
Yeah.
So that you actually make them look at it. Cause I just got my advisor's quarterly report for fun last week. And in anticipation of this call, I actually for the first time read it after 6 years of working with them. And I was like, oh, now I get it. I'm supposed to be jumping here. I have my personal question. And I could have easily known that from the beginning and probably been more likely to stay with them.
So I think this is great. By the way, if I have a big takeaway that I wasn't expecting to have going into this, it's that there's almost like a meta level of communication that we should actually start having. And what I mean by that is to say, hey, we're going to change around our form of communication a little bit. Like you might expect this. And now that I think about it, we actually got that message from UCLA when at my university, we got this note that said, from now on, And it actually did it. This is the big, like, it's going to be a box and this is how the email is going to look. So we're orienting you to this. Like, this is what you can expect. I think this is, something that maybe could be done. All right, Todd, I've got one final question for you. Basically, it's like rapid fire here. Just from your perspective, is there, one final takeaway, anything you want advisors to leave knowing from this conversation, or anything we didn't cover? This is sort of like dealer's choice, whatever you want to say here. It could be a repeat of something as long as you don't say norms and expectations. Or it could be something new, whatever you want.
All right, I'm going to do two things, but I promise they'll be quick. One is with regards to AI. People are often wondering, like, so what does AI mean for all this?
Great.
To the extent that a human is going to be reading what we are producing, it does not matter if it is you writing it, your AI writing it, or you two together. If you want a human to read it, you want to make it easy for them. And it does not matter what the production side looks like. We are centering the consumption side.
Okay.
And that means, and it turns out that like Claude and ChatGPT and whatever aren't really like centered on making it easy to read in this way. You can ask them, and I'll give you in the show notes a prompt. I made an AI tool that had something like 400,000 users, and then we just retired it at GPT-5 because GPT-5 had clearly read and processed my book with Jessica, despite it being copyrighted. And which I'm happy for, but you just need to tell it, right? Like Todd Rogers and Jessica Lasky Fink would, whatever, and tell me how you applied the 6 principles to edit this. And then you can make a personal GPT that does this, and it turns out it's amazing at it. But you have to tell it to, otherwise it's going to produce what it's going to produce.
Yeah.
The actual takeaway, if I'm going to repeat, we should add a round of editing to everything we write where we ask ourselves, how do I make it easier for the reader? It makes us more effective. It's also kinder to our readers. How do I make it easier for the reader?
That's great. Todd, you probably could tell that I could keep going and, felt the need to cut this off so that we stay within time. But this is great. I'm so appreciative. Now is the time where I'm going to be kind by like just talking for a really long time about how great you are. No, I'm just kidding. I just really appreciate you spending the time. This is great. This is super useful. I think there's some practical tips here. Look, this is about advisors, but at the end of the day, this is about communicating with anybody. And it's not just getting people to do the things that we want them to do, but how do we just communicate information out there so that we understand each other better? And I really appreciate your research on this and your perspective on it. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. And I hope this is useful to your listeners.